We're recording. This is The Second Coming by Yeats, William Butler Yeats. A little bit about him if you want to know. Let's pop out this little side. Widely considered to be one of the greatest poets of the 20th century, Protestant Anglo-Irish minority that controlled the economic, political, and social cultural life of Ireland since the end of the 17th century. More abstract than some of the poetry that we've gone over before, but I like this poem. So if you want to listen to somebody reading it, you could push on this, but I'm going to go over it real quick. The Second Coming. Turning and turning in a widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming. Hardly those words are out, when a vast image out of Spiritus Mundi troubles my sight. Somewhere in the sands of the desert, a shape with a lion body and the head of a man, a gaze blank and pitiless as the sun, is moving its slow thighs, while all about it reel shadows of the indigent desert birds. The darkness drops again, but I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle, and what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born. Let's go over some vocab. We're going to start with vocab on this one because there is some troubling vocab. Some of it's a little archaic English, and we're not really used to hearing it a lot. So let's go ahead and start with those. First word, first line, gyre. If you're not familiar with what that is, it's a spiral cone shape. It's part of his complicated view of mysterious historical forces. One spinning revolution of history gives way to another. So as it goes in a circle, it widens out, and it's like something circling from above. Okay? The falcon and the falconer in line 2. The falcon cannot hear the falconer. Falcon is a kind of bird. It's a bird of prey, like a hawk. It's a small hawk, basically, or a small eagle. And falconry is the art of training a falcon to follow commands. Originally, it was done for hunting purposes, and the person that trains him is the falconer. So the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Basically, they're talking about nature or going off its rails, right? Anarchy, in case you don't know what that is, that's line 4. It's a state of sheer disorder. That's what it's meant. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed. Loosed means to let loose. Blood-dimmed, obviously darkened by blood or red. Red tide, I would say here. Surely some revelation is at hand. It's kind of got a double meaning here. A revelation is a sudden or a divine or supernatural realization that's given to mankind. Okay? It seems to be either spiritual or religious in nature. Boom. It's also an allusion, even though he doesn't capitalize it, it's an allusion to the biblical book of Revelation. So it's also his way of saying something similar to line 10, which is the next line. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. And that second coming, if you look at it, is capitalized, which means it's a proper name for something. And this second coming here is the Christian idea that Jesus will someday return to the earth and save those who are worthy, right? So things are going out of whack, and he sees this as the end of times, right? Surely the second coming is at hand. Next problem word is this Latin word right here, Spiritus Mundi. It means world spirit. Yeats believed that humanity has a collective unconscious, and poets can draw powerful symbols and images out of this world spirit. So he uses it as the collective unconscious of mankind. Pitiless down here, without pity. Okay. A gaze blank and pitiless as the sun. Um, about it in slow, moving its slow thighs while all about it. Reel shadows, reeling means to move around chaotically. Indignant right here. Real shadows of the indignant desert birds. That means angry or disturbed. So this thing has made them angry by getting up. Vexed. And we're vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle. It means frustrated, annoyed, or irritated. So 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare, were annoyed or irritated to nightmare by a rocking cradle. Slouches towards Bethlehem. Slouches is relates to the beast movement, right? He talked about what rough beast. Slouches towards Bethlehem. It's moving slowly and dragging a heavy weight. And then Bethlehem, obviously, it's the Christians believe Bethlehem is the birthplace of Jesus Christ, Son of God. It is situated in the region today known as Palestine. So, right there in that contested land. Long poem. Not crazy long, especially if you're going to be reading more poetry, but it's a really easy theme, right? Like we all get it. It presents a nightmarish and apocalyptic scenario as the speaker describes all these human beings, increasing loss of control and tendency towards violence and anarchy. We have all these images that fly at the reader pretty quickly, and it creates an unsettling atmosphere that suggests the world is on the brink of destruction. Yet, it's got a ton of metaphors in it, and it's pretty complicated, but it's actually really simple, the message itself, right? It predicts that time is up for humanity, and that civilization as we know it is about to be undone. Okay? Anybody see anything familiar in recent events in this poem? Wow, right? Like, we used to be able to go to the store. We used to have sports. We used to have a whole bunch of things. I used to be able to like go to the mall and walk around, go to the movies. Can we do that anymore? Like, there's been a serious shift in civilization as we know it, right? So hopefully that got you thinking about that a little bit. Now, this was actually written right after World War One, and World War One was a global catastrophe that killed millions of people. It's pretty unsurprising that this poem paints this bleak picture of humanity, suggesting that civilization's sense of progress and order is kind of only this veneer. It's an illusion that sits on top of what is actually going on underneath. It might have a little bit of challenging imagery, but think about this. This is the English teacher in me. Like, what kind of poems are going to come out of this whole situation, right? Like, are we going to see more poems like this out of our whole COVID-19 situation? Like everything stopping, world coming to an end. Like somebody out there is writing some pretty awesome poetry right now. I don't know if we'll be able to see it though, but that's just the English teacher in me. So the first stanza itself, it's got a lot of puzzling images, and you got to remember that these images would be familiar to somebody who was reading it when it was written. Okay? And when you start thinking about the theme of the poem, right? The simple message, time's up, things are going crazy, we're all going to die. Well, maybe not all going to die, but civilization as we know it is at an end, right? That's the message. And when you look at it that way, the images start to make a little bit more sense. The falconer represents humanity's need to control the world around it, right? Like that's all we do. We flatten mountains to make road passes. We knock down forests. We build houses. Like we try to control our environment as much as we can. Look at the weather for the next like 4 days. It's going to be like 100 degrees, right? Well, we have a problem, or we have a solution for that problem. We're going to be inside with air conditioning or somewhere cool with the fan on, right? We have tried to tame nature as much as we can. And this first image of a falcon not hearing the falconer basically gives up that humanity's attempt to control the world is failing. And as history goes around and around, turning and turning in this widening gyre, it kind of just all spins apart. The first lines could also suggest kind of how the modern world has distanced people from nature. Like the only nature we really see is a park down the street, and that's really not nature at all. So that could be another reading of this. But in any case, it's clear whatever connection that once linked this falcon to the falconer has broken, and now the world's kind of spiraling into chaos. The poem suggests that though humanity might have looked like it was making progress over the past 20 centuries, it says, we got scientific developments, we have advancements in things like travel and flight. Our world is more connected than ever now. Even when this was written towards World War One, things were speeding up. Like they had just a few years earlier finished the Transcontinental Railroad. They can go from one side of the country to the other pretty quickly. Mail was speeding up. The technology for steaming across the Atlantic was speeding up as well, right? So communication in the world seemed to be getting smaller and smaller because of this new knowledge, because of the scientific developments that were happening. And then boom, like World War One happens, and it proved that that we as a race are capable of self-destruction as much as ever. Anarchy was loosed upon the world along with tides of blood, which is right here. And innocence is a ceremony, the ceremony of innocence, that's been drowned in these tides of blood. The best people lack conviction. They sit around and they do nothing, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. The worst people seem eager for destruction and out there doing things, while the best of us sit back, dumbfounded, and don't do anything about it. The current state of the world, according to the speaker, proves that the center, this foundation of society, was never very strong to begin with and has started to unravel. Let's go on to the second syllable. So, because of all this happening, some revelation is at hand. We have a break here from one stanza to another. This sets up the situation. Things are falling apart. It's crazy. I don't know if you guys read that book, Things Fall Apart. It's about refugees. Oh, God, I can't think of it right now. It's a novel. And I know that we were reading it. It's a Nigerian author, Chinua Achebe, and it's Things Fall Apart. Basically, it's about, it chronicles pre-colonial life in the southeastern part of Nigeria, and then the arrival of Europeans bringing civilization to these natives. And the actual title of the book, Things Fall Apart, was taken from this poem as he wrote it. So all these things falling apart, the writer of the poem, or the speaker of the poem, it believes surely some revelation is at hand. Surely this means something, right? Surely. Excitedly, the speaker claims right here, surely the second coming is at hand, referencing the Bible again. He says it again, the second coming, right? He excitedly says it. But just as he says it, a vision comes to his mind from the world's collective unconsciousness, and he sees somewhere in the sands of the desert a creature with a man's head and a lion's body comes to life. Anybody know what creature has a lion's head and a man's body? Nope, the other way around. A man's head and a lion's body? Okay, think about that. Its expression, like the sun, is empty and without pity. Its legs are moving slowly, and all around it fly the shadows of disturbed desert birds. So it's so big, and its coming has made such a commotion that all the birds in the area take flight and don't know what's going on, which is just trying to impress upon you the magnitude of the beast that has awoken. Everything becomes dark again. Okay, the darkness drops again. So here's the vision from when a vast image out of Spiritus Mundi. From here, the darkness drops again. He's out of the vision. And the speaker knows something new. Like out of this vision came a revelation. 2,000 years of calm have been irreversibly disrupted by the shaking of a cradle. And the speaker asks, what beast whose time has finally come is dragging itself towards Bethlehem, where it will be born? Okay? So there's a lot of morality and Christianity within this poem. Yeats was, being Irish Catholic or Protestant. Those were the two dominant religions in Ireland. And it offers an unsettling take on Christian morality, right? It suggests that it is not the stable and reliable force that people believed it to be. The poem clearly alludes to the book of Revelation right at the start, and which, simply put, Jesus returns to earth and says, if you're worthy, come with me. If not, have fun. We're going to have hell on earth. And according to the Bible, this is meant to happen when humanity reaches end times, an era of complete war, famine, destruction, and hatred. The poem suggests that the end times are already happening because humanity has lost all sense of morality, and perhaps that this morality was really only an illusion to begin with. In the first stanza, it kind of, like I said, it describes how everything falls apart, but the second makes it clearer that it's specifically this Christian sense of morality that's being undone. It describes a bunch of wide-ranging destruction, and forces the reader to question whether or not this Christian morality was based on weak foundations in the first place. And we just kind of pretended to be moral, not really were. We have drenched ourselves in blood. This blood dim tide right there. And what the poem's kind of getting at is that nobody, well, okay, let's keep going. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. So, humanity drenched itself in blood, the blood dim tide, suggesting morality was ever only the ceremony that a performance that we conjured to make it seem like we were innocent. And ultimately, it suggests that no one, not even Jesus, can remedy this bleak reality. The biblical book of Revelations predicts this kind of final reckoning where people essentially get what they deserve based on their moral behavior and religious virtues. It indicates Jesus will come to save those who are worthy, but the second coming offers really no such comfort. Okay? Let's talk about the vision. So, the blank gaze, let's go to the blank gaze of this new creature, provides further evidence of how just hopeless the situation is. The being that comes through, it might have the head of a man, but it doesn't have moral sense. It's pitiless. It's arriving to preside over blood-dim tides and drowned innocence, and not a world of kindness, charity, and justice. The Sphinx-like appearance, also deliberately at odds with the Christian imagery, further suggests a break with Christian morality. His mention of Spiritus Mundi it's what Yeats thought of as the world's collective unconsciousness. A poet can draw insight from it, and the vision of the beast then is suggested like there's a worldwide shift into anarchy as we let go of our morality. Although there's a lot of ambiguity in the poem, there are specific cultural references that would be very well read into by the people of the time. But there's no mistaking that, like, it's a bleak vision of the future of humankind, and one which presents our morality as kind of a collective dream that has turned into this nightmare. We kind of went line by line already. All right. Let's talk about the speaker a little bit. The speaker is really not specified. It does offer a few clues as to the speaker's perspective, though, right? Where the speaker is coming from. It's important to notice that there's a clear difference between stanza 1 and stanza 2. The opening stanza has no interventions or ways to make the speaker's role obvious. There are no first-person pronouns, nor do there seem to be any subjective opinions expressed. The first stanza, it kind of reads like a weird news bulletin, right? Listing the chaos and the confusion and the misery in the world, and really doing it in general terms. The only thing that suggests the first stanza may not be entirely objective is the worst of the word gyre right here. It's a mythical philosophical idea from another of Yeats' poems called A Vision. So there's a little bit of interaction there. But the second stanza shifts. It shifts the speaker's role. Suddenly the speaker is introducing their own opinion, right? Crying, surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. And indeed, he even repeated the second coming with an exclamation point, right? It almost seems like there's an air of desperation here. And it's reinforced by this exclamation point. Lines 13 through 18 kind of show that he's channeling the world's unconscious. And the vision seems to be some sort of premonition, which he ends with lines 18 to 22, talking about this grim beast that is being introduced to the world. The speaker, like, he makes a lot of references to the Bible and the second coming, which seems that the speaker might have some alignment with the Christian moral and mythical framework that's going on, because he is really outlining the collapse of that Christian world. And that's what's meant by these 20 centuries of stony sleep. Christianity's only been around since Jesus was alive, right? So Jesus was alive about 2,000 years ago. 20 centuries of stony sleep. This seems to, at least to the speaker, signal the end of or collapse, maybe, I would say, of the Christian world. We don't really have a setting. It's definitely abstract, although different places and things are mentioned. It's mostly mentioned in vision. It does get a little bit specific in the second half, but it even gets weirder. So I would say that as long as setting, there is no particular setting. And I think it specifically avoids being deliberate about its setting, right? Because it could be happening anywhere. And I think that that's what needs to, the universality of where it could be happening is the important part here, right? There's no one specific point, like this is happening here at this time. No, it could happen at any time, and that's at any place. And that's kind of what is going on with it. Let's see, one more thing. There's no real rhyme scheme in it. He does use some archaic words that we defined, but it wouldn't be weird for the day, for the time it was written, right? Like if we write poems today about snaps or tweets or something like that, like who's going to know what the heck those are 50 years from now? You really think that somebody's going to understand? Maybe, but probably not. Those are very time specific, right? Like if somebody puts YOLO down in a poem, like what the hell's that? Like nobody's going to understand. It's a very cultural and timely reference and very specific vocabulary. So think about that as you're reading this. Things that might have been very commonplace the day it was written or for the time it was written have now moved into some archaic language. Anything else? 2 stanzas, 8 lines in the first one, 14 lines in the second. Both of them resemble a sonnet, but they're not a sonnet. And I mean, one of the main things, it does end on a rhetorical question. Makes the reader think, right? What rough beast its hour come round at last slouches toward Bethlehem to be born. Signaling not only the end of a Christian era, but the beginning of a new one. Because that Bethlehem was where the old Christian morality era had begun. A little bit of enjambment. Enjambment's where the one line follows throughout to the next, although there is more punctuation in this poem than we have had in other poems recently. So line 1 to 2 and line 5 to 6, 7 to 8. But we do have a lot that are separate, thoughts that are separated out with punctuation. So it's not universal throughout the poem. I think that's going to be it for this poem. As long as you get the gist that it's, end times, the way we're living up to now is about to change based on a morally Christian attitude, and because of the anarchy and all the stuff happening in the world, it seems we've lost it, and we might be starting with a new sense of ourselves and of morality as not yet defined by Christianity. Okay? All right. Make sure you get those done. Let's hop into teams real quick. I'm going to start putting this down. Let me share this. No, let's not share that one. What am I trying to share? I'm trying to share this one. Here we go. All right. So make sure that within our team and within your novel groups, your study guide answers are there. I'm going to be grading those today. Okay. I will be dropping your quiz for both the Purloined Letter and for chapters 5 and 6. No, sorry, just 6. Into the chat right now, along with your Flipgrid. Make sure that you are doing those. I had more people do Flipgrids yesterday than have in the past, and I appreciate that. Your Flipgrids are normally worth 25 points. I made them worth 50 this week. And if you actually do it on time, I'm giving you an extra 25 points. So you're getting 75 out of 50, which goes to bring your grade up. So if you haven't been doing them, I would definitely go back and do the ones from this week so that you get full points and even some extra credit. Here is the Flipgrid. Oh, sorry, that's not supposed to be that. Let's get rid of that. Copy that. There we go. There is the Flipgrid for today. Let's go do the quizzes for today. Chapter 6. I have a separate book test for today, or for the whole book. That'll be separate than just the chapter 6. So make sure that that's done. There is chapter 6. And then lastly, your last one will be on the purloined letter, which you were supposed to read. It's 10 questions. It's not crazy. And I'm going to drop that into Teams as well. And those will be the 3 things you need to do for the rest of today. If you have any questions, I'll be around. If you did not get the grades updated yesterday and you still want to know what they are, go ahead and give me an email, or not email, give me a chat message. I will definitely send those grades to you if you ask for them. If there are no other questions, into your novel groups, let's get those quizzes done, and let's get that work turned in. We only got 1 day left, guys. Have a good day.